The final box landed with a satisfying thud against the floor. I straightened up, rubbing the dull ache that had settled into my lower back after hours of hauling our belongings up 3 flights of stairs. Our apartment. It still felt strange saying that. That's the last one, I announced, surveying the chaos of scattered cardboard and furniture pieces strewn across the living room floor. Emma emerged from the kitchen, her auburn hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, sweat making her freckles stand out against her flushed cheeks. I can't believe we own so much junk. Most of it's yours, I replied, ducking as a balled-up piece of packing paper flew toward my head. Tom walked in from the hallway carrying an empty dolly. My cousin had been a tremendous help, not just with the heavy lifting, but also with finding us this apartment in the first place. Navigating Brooklyn's real estate market wasn't easy, especially on our budget, but Tom had connections through his construction work. "You guys are all set," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Nice place. 4th floor walk-up is rough on moving day, but those high ceilings make up for it." I nodded, properly taking in our new home for the first time. The living room stretched longer than it was wide, with tall windows flooding the space with light from the street. The hardwood floors had character, scuffs and marks from previous tenants, but they'd clean up nicely. The walls could use a fresh coat of paint, but that could wait. "Thanks again, man," I said, clapping Tom on the shoulder. "Seriously, don't mention it. Just invite me to the housewarming." He checked his watch. "I should get going. Jen's waiting on me for dinner." After Tom left, Emma and I worked in relative silence, unpacking essentials and assembling our bed frame. By late afternoon, we'd carved some semblance of order from the chaos. I had just finished connecting the TV when Emma's phone buzzed. She looked unhappy at the screen. "It's my mom." I knew that tone. "Everything okay?" "Not really. Dad's out of town and she says she fell this morning. Bruised her hip pretty bad." Emma sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "She says she's fine, but you want to check on her. Would you hate me if I went there tonight? I know it's our first night here, but..." "Emma, go. It's fine. I meant it, too." Her mom lived alone in Jersey, only an hour away by train. "We have plenty of time to christen the place." She smiled, threw her arms around my neck, and kissed me. "Thank you. I'll go pack a bag." 30 minutes later, I watched from our living room window as Emma got into a cab on the street below. She glanced up, waved, then disappeared into the yellow car. I felt strange as the cab drove away, not quite lonely, but acutely aware that I was alone in a new, unfamiliar place. I turned back to face our half-unpacked apartment. Boxes everywhere, furniture not quite where it should be, walls bare. Home, but not yet home. I decided to order pizza and watch the Nets game to fill the silence. While waiting for delivery, I headed to the kitchen for a beer. That's when I spotted it. A plain white envelope on the counter, my name written on it in block letters. I frowned, certain it hadn't been there earlier. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 rules typed out. 1. Close all windows and curtains after sunset. 2. Keep the bedroom door open at night. 3. Do not open the refrigerator between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. 4. If the TV turns on by itself after 3 a.m., do not look at the screen. 5. Never let children inside the apartment. I laughed, reading through the bizarre list a second time. Had to be Tom's weird idea of a housewarming gift. The guy had an odd sense of humor. I pulled out my phone and called him. "Hey, what's up?" He answered after the 3rd ring. "Very funny with the rules list," I said. "What rules list?" "The envelope you left. The weird rules for the apartment." A pause. "No idea what you're talking about, Ryan." "Right. So you didn't leave a note with creepy rules on our counter? Seriously, I didn't leave anything. Maybe the previous tenant or the landlord has some weird policies. I glanced at the paper again. Rule number 3 seemed particularly specific. Yeah, must be. Anyway, thanks again for today. No problem. Hey, let me know if you find any more weird notes. He chuckled. Will do. I hung up, looking at the list. If Tom didn't leave it, who did? The landlord seemed unlikely. We dealt with a property management company, and the agent who gave us the keys was all business. The previous tenant made the most sense. Probably their idea of a joke to freak out the new residents. The buzzer rang, snapping me from my thoughts. Pizza had arrived. I spent the next few hours on the couch watching the Nets lose badly while eating lukewarm pizza straight from the box. Outside, the sun was going down. The strange rules popped into my head as I watched the sunset. Close all windows and curtains after sunset. I snorted. Right. I stayed on the couch, not bothering to get up. We'd hung curtains in the bedroom, but hadn't gotten around to the living room yet. Besides, the view of Brooklyn at sunset was worth seeing. You could see water towers on distant rooftops. As darkness fell, the apartment grew unusually quiet. Our building sat on a busy street, but the noise seemed to fade away. No honking cars, no neighbors' footsteps overhead, not even the usual creaks of an old building settling. Just silence. I turned my attention back to the game, but I couldn't focus. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. At first, I barely noticed it, just a slight chill on my arms. But soon enough, I reached for the throw blanket we'd tossed over the back of the couch earlier. Strange. It was a warm spring evening. The heating system in these old buildings usually ran too hot, if anything. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders, my eyes growing heavy as the game entered its final quarter. The Nets were down by 15. No coming back from that. My phone showed 11:43 p.m. when I checked it. I should get to bed, I thought. But the couch felt too comfortable, the effort of moving to the bedroom too great after the long day of unpacking. Just a few more minutes, I decided, letting my head rest against the cushion. The last thing I remembered was the TV announcer's voice as my eyes closed. I fell asleep, not knowing what the darkness might bring. A soft knock pulled me from sleep. I blinked at the darkened living room, momentarily confused about where I was, the couch cushions beneath me, the pizza box on the coffee table, the towers of unpacked boxes. Right. The new apartment. Another knock came. Quiet but unmistakable. I reached for my phone stuck between the couch cushions. The screen lit up bright. 3:15 a.m. Emma wouldn't be back until morning. Tom had left hours ago. Who would be at our door in the middle of the night? The knocking came again, more insistent this time. I sat up, trying to shake the fog of sleep from my brain. The TV was off, though I didn't remember turning it off before I fell asleep. Hello, a small voice called from the hallway. Is anyone there? Please let me in. I'm lost. A child's voice. The list of rules flashed in my mind. Rule number 5, never let children inside the apartment. I froze. The rules had seemed like a stupid joke just hours ago. Now, with the voice of a child coming from outside my door at 3 a.m., the joke wasn't funny anymore. Please, the voice called again, higher pitched and more desperate. I know you're in there. I can see your light. Please help me. What light? I hadn't turned on any lights after falling asleep. I looked around the room. The only light came from the street lamps outside streaming through our curtainless windows. Rule number 1, close all windows and curtains after sunset. I hadn't done that. I'd laughed it off. "I'm scared," the voice whimpered. "My mom isn't home. I don't know which apartment is mine." Everything in me wanted to get up and help. What kind of person leaves a lost child in a hallway? But something kept me frozen on the couch, my hands gripping the blanket. The knocking turned to pounding, each thud making me flinch. "Let me in." The child's voice changed, dropping an octave while somehow staying young. "I know you're in there." I sat motionless, barely breathing. The pounding continued for what felt like an eternity, the door shaking in its frame with each impact. How could a child hit that hard? Then, all at once, it stopped. The silence felt worse than the noise. At least with the knocking, I knew where the threat was. Now the quiet stretched out, hiding whatever waited beyond my door. Minutes passed. The only sound was my breathing, which I tried to keep quiet. Eventually, I gathered enough courage to stand. My legs shook as I crept toward the door, careful not to make the floorboards creak. At the door, I hesitated, then leaned forward to look through the peephole. The hallway outside was empty. No child, no sign anyone had been there at all. I felt relief wash over me as I backed away from the door. My imagination playing tricks. That's all it was. I just needed more sleep after the long day of moving. I turned to head back to the couch. The TV switched on. The sudden blast of static cut through the silence, making me jump. White noise filled the screen, bathing the room in flickering light. Rule number 4, if the TV turns on by itself after 3 a.m., do not look at the screen. I grabbed for the remote on the coffee table, keeping my eyes fixed on the floor. But as I fumbled with the buttons, my eyes flicked up for just an instant. In that split second, I saw it. A child's face in the static. Not a normal child. Its mouth stretched too wide across its face, filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth. Its eyes were black holes that seemed to lock onto mine through the screen. I stabbed at the power button, and the TV went dark, but the image stayed burned into my vision like an afterimage from a camera flash. My whole body shook as I backed away from the television. I hit the light switch on the wall, flooding the room with light from the ceiling fixture. Then I turned on the floor lamp, too. The rules weren't a joke. They weren't left by the landlord or a prank from Tom. They were warnings. I spent the next 3 hours in the corner of the living room, every light in the apartment blazing. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, facing both the front door and the TV. I didn't dare close my eyes. Every small sound, the refrigerator humming, the radiator clicking, the building settling, made me tense up. The refrigerator. Rule 3 said not to open it between 1 and 2 a.m. That time had passed, but what would have happened if I'd gotten up for a midnight snack? I checked my phone constantly, watching the minutes crawl by. For 17 a.m., for 53 a.m., 5:24 a.m. outside, the sky slowly lightened from black to deep blue. By 6:23 a.m., sunshine began to streak through the windows. I didn't move from my corner until the entire apartment was bathed in morning light. Only then did I stand, my back stiff and legs cramped from sitting in one position for so long. In daylight, with cars honking on the street below and people heading to work, last night's terror felt distant, but not unreal. I knew what I'd seen. I knew the rules were real. I made coffee, my hand still not entirely steady. Emma would be back around 10 a.m. I had no idea how I would explain what had happened, or if she would even believe me. As I waited, I taped the list of rules to our refrigerator door. The sound of keys in the door jolted me awake. I'd been nodding off in the armchair facing the front door, jumping at every creak and groan the building made. All the lights in the apartment were still on, even though morning sunshine was streaming through the windows. Emma walked in, dropping her overnight bag by the door. "Hey, I'm back." "Mom's doing better than," she stopped mid-sentence, looking at me. "Ryan, what happened?" I knew how I looked. Hair sticking up in all directions, dark circles under bloodshot eyes, still wearing yesterday's clothes. The empty coffee mug scattered around me told the rest of the story. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I said, my voice rough from lack of sleep. Emma sat on the couch across from me, leaning forward with concern on her face. "Try me." I took a deep breath and told her everything, the knocking at 3 a.m., the child's voice in the hallway, how it had changed from pleading to threatening. I described the TV turning on by itself and what I'd seen in the static. As I spoke, Emma's face grew paler. "I know it sounds crazy," I finished, rubbing my eyes. "But it happened. All of it." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked to the kitchen and returned with the rules list I'd taped to the refrigerator. She stared at the paper, chewing her lower lip. "I saw this yesterday," she said quietly, "when we were unpacking." I sat up straighter. "What? Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I thought it was stupid. Just some weird joke from the previous tenants or something." She dropped onto the couch again. "I didn't want to freak you out over nothing." "Well, it's not nothing," I said, pointing at the list. "Whatever's in here with us knows these rules, and it gets pissed when we break them." Emma ran her hands through her hair, a gesture she made when overwhelmed. "So, what do we do?" "Move out." I'd spent hours thinking about this while waiting for morning. "We can't. Remember, the lease has that clause about early termination. 6 months rent as penalty." "Ryan, I don't care about money if we're not safe here. We don't have that kind of cash, and we'd lose our security deposit. We'd be screwed." She paced the living room, stepping around unpacked boxes. "So we just live with this thing, whatever it is." I stood up, my body aching from the awkward position I'd maintained all night. "We follow the rules. We figure out what this thing is. There has to be a reason it's here, right? Maybe we can get rid of it." Emma looked skeptical but nodded slowly. "Okay. Yeah. We follow the rules and do some research." We spent the day unpacking, trying to make the apartment feel normal. Neither of us mentioned what waited for nightfall. Emma hung curtains in the living room while I assembled furniture. We worked methodically, the mundane tasks serving as a distraction from our underlying fear. As sunset approached, I made sure every window was shut tight and every curtain drawn. Emma checked the bedroom door, propping it wide open with a heavy box. We ate dinner in tense silence, both watching the clock. "Do you think we should stay up?" Emma asked as we got ready for bed. "Keep watch or something?" I shook my head, feeling exhausted. I can barely keep my eyes open. Besides, if we follow the rules, we should be okay. We climbed into bed, leaving the light on in the hallway. I was exhausted, but sleep didn't come easily. I kept jerking awake, thinking I'd heard something. Emma lay beside me, her breathing too regular to be real. She was pretending to sleep, too. The digital clock on the nightstand showed 1:28 a.m. when a soft thud came from the kitchen. Emma's hand grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Another thud, followed by what sounded like something sliding across the floor. "It's coming from the kitchen," I whispered back. We both remembered Rule 3 at the same time. Do not open the refrigerator between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. "We should stay here," Emma said, her voice barely audible. A louder crash made us both jump. My heart pounded in my chest. "I'm just going to look," I said, slipping out of bed. "I won't go in." "Ryan, don't." But I was already heading down the hallway, staying close to the wall. At the kitchen entrance, I stopped and peered around the corner. The refrigerator door stood wide open, filling the kitchen with an eerie blue light. Food items lay scattered across the floor. As I watched, something moved inside the refrigerator. A darkness deeper than shadows, pulsing and shifting between the shelves. It didn't have a clear shape, just a mass of blackness that seemed to absorb the light around it. I backed away silently, retreating to the bedroom where Emma sat frozen with fear. "What is it?" "What did you see?" she asked. "The fridge is open," I whispered. "Something's inside it. Something dark." We huddled together in bed, listening to the continued sounds of movement from the kitchen. After what felt like hours, but was only 30 minutes, according to the clock, everything went quiet. Neither of us moved until the clock read 2:15 a.m. Only then did Emma speak. "We need to check." I nodded, finding my courage again now that the forbidden hour had passed. Together, we crept down the hallway to the kitchen, Emma clinging to the back of my t-shirt. The kitchen looked like a disaster zone. Food was scattered everywhere, milk puddles on the floor, eggs smashed against the wall, vegetables thrown across the room. The refrigerator door hung open, but nothing was inside now. "Jesus," Emma breathed, surveying the damage. I stepped forward to examine the mess more closely. Several items, an apple, a plastic container, the milk carton, bore deep scratch marks, as if something with claws had been handling them. "It's like it was looking for something," I said, picking up the scratched apple. We spent the next half hour cleaning up the mess, neither of us wanting to leave it until morning. Working helped calm our nerves, giving us something to focus on instead of the thing we couldn't see in our apartment. Back in bed, we lay awake until dawn. We kept the bedroom door open, remembering the rules we needed to follow. We only fell asleep when sunlight started creeping through the edges of the blackout curtains. By afternoon, we'd managed a few hours of rest and sat at the kitchen table with strong coffee, trying to make sense of what was happening to us. "We need more information," I said, opening my laptop. "There have to be others who've experienced this." "What are you looking for exactly?" Emma asked, looking over my shoulder. "Anything about our building. Paranormal stuff in Brooklyn." I tried various search terms: haunted apartments Brooklyn, supernatural Brooklyn buildings, strange rules apartment, before finding a Reddit thread titled Haunted Brooklyn Apartments, Share Your Experiences. Scrolling through, I found a post from 3 years ago, lived in a building on Flatbush Avenue for 6 months. Weird stuff happened at night. Previous tenant left a list of rules. Thought it was a joke until I opened the fridge at 1:30 a.m. and something tried to pull me inside. Broke my lease and left the next day. Never going back. "Holy shit," Emma said, reading along with me. "That's our building." I kept scrolling, finding more posts. "Anyone else experience a child knocking at your door in the middle of the night? 4th floor apartment in Brooklyn. Wouldn't stop until sunrise. TV turned on by itself every night at 3:02 a.m. exactly. Always static. Saw faces in it once. Never looked again." There were dozens of similar stories going back years. Some talked about specific rules. Others just described frightening experiences that matched what we'd already seen. One post mentioned a shadow thing that seemed to live in the walls. "We're not crazy," I said, scrolling through the comments. "This is real. Whatever's here has been here for years." Emma got up and paced the living room. "But what is it? A ghost? Something else?" I shook my head. "I don't know, but we need to find out." I closed the laptop and looked at her. "We need to talk to the neighbors, see if they know anything. And we should check local records, newspaper archives, that kind of thing. There must be a history here." Emma nodded, looking more determined. "I'll talk to the neighbors tomorrow. Mrs. Patel in 4D has lived here forever. She might know something. And I'll go to the Brooklyn Historical Society," I added. They keep archives of local newspapers. Maybe there's something about the building. We spent the rest of the day making our apartment as secure as possible, checking windows, testing lights, making sure the bedroom door couldn't accidentally close. We knew the night would bring more challenges, but for the first time since discovering the rules, we had a plan. That night, we followed every rule to the letter. The refrigerator remained undisturbed during the forbidden hour. We kept the bedroom door propped open. All curtains were drawn before sunset. Nothing happened. No knocking, no TV turning on, no strange noises from the kitchen. In the morning, we were exhausted but determined. As Emma prepared to talk to the neighbors and I gathered my things to visit the Historical Society, we shared a look of grim determination. Whatever haunted our new home, we would face it together. The Brooklyn Historical Society occupied a gorgeous 19th century building with towering ceilings and the unmistakable scent of old paper and wood polish. After checking in at the front desk, I was directed to a reading room where a librarian helped me navigate their digital newspaper archives. "I'm researching the history of my apartment building," I explained. "Specifically, anything unusual that might have happened there." The librarian, a grey-haired woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, raised an eyebrow. "Address?" I gave her our Flatbush Avenue address, and she typed it into the database. "How far back do you want to go?" "As far as possible." She nodded and showed me how to use the search system before leaving me alone with the computer. I spent the first hour scrolling through mundane reports, building permits from the 1920s when the building was first constructed, property tax assessments, ownership changes. Nothing strange jumped out. Then I refined my search to include terms like incident, accident, and a police. The results narrowed, and I clicked on a Brooklyn Daily Eagle article from March 12, 1978, with the headline, "Local Boy Missing, Police Searching Flatbush Area." My mouth went dry as I read, 8-year-old William Billy Henderson disappeared Tuesday afternoon after telling playmates he was going to explore the basement of his apartment building on Flatbush Avenue. Police have conducted an extensive search of the building and surrounding neighborhood but have found no trace of the boy. "We're checking every possible lead," said Detective James Morales. "We urge anyone with information to come forward." The boy's mother, Margaret Henderson, a single parent, was at work when the disappearance occurred. Neighbors reported that Billy was a well-behaved child who rarely wandered from the building unattended. I clicked to the next day's paper, finding a follow-up article with a photo of Billy, a small, serious-faced boy with a cowlick, and his distraught mother standing next to a police officer. The search had expanded to include volunteer groups searching nearby Prospect Park. Over the following weeks, the coverage grew smaller, relegated to brief updates hidden on back pages. After 2 months, the case went cold. Billy Henderson was never found. I dug deeper, searching specifically for our apartment number. The results made my skin crawl. Starting in 1980, there were regular rental listings for apartment for B, our apartment. Most telling was the pattern: new tenants would move in, and within 4 to 6 months, the apartment would be listed again. During this research, one name caught my attention in a small rental notice from 3 months ago: apartment for B, recently vacated by M. Reynolds, available immediately. Michael Reynolds, the previous tenant. I copied down every article about Billy Henderson and printed the rental pattern information before heading back to the apartment. Emma wasn't home yet when I arrived. I spread my findings across the kitchen table, arranging them in chronological order. The story they told was chilling. A boy disappears without a trace. And afterward, people can't seem to stay in our apartment for more than half a year. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma, "Meeting you at Milo's Diner in 30. Got some info." I gathered my papers and headed out, eager to hear what she'd learned. Milo's was a small, retro-style diner a block from our building. Emma was already in a booth by the window, a cup of coffee between her hands. Her face looked serious. What did you find out? I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. A lot. She leaned forward. I talked to Mrs. Patel in 4D. She's lived here since the 70s. Did she mention Billy Henderson? Emma's eyes widened. How did you know about him? I pulled out the newspaper articles and spread them on the table. 8-year-old boy disappeared in 1978. Never found. Emma nodded, pushing her coffee aside. Mrs. Patel told me all about it. She knew Margaret Henderson, Billy's mother. They moved into 4B in 1976. Margaret worked as a secretary downtown, and Billy would stay with a neighbor after school. What happened to him? According to Mrs. Patel, Billy was playing with some kids from the building that day. They were taking turns daring each other to go into the basement alone. When it was Billy's turn, he went down and never came back up. I looked down at the newspaper photo of the serious little boy. The papers said they searched the building. They did. Mrs. Patel said the police went through every inch of the place, including the basement. They found nothing. No sign of a struggle, no blood, nothing to suggest he'd been taken or hurt. A waitress appeared at our table, but we waved her away. What about Margaret? I asked. What happened to her? Emma ran a hand through her hair. That's where it gets weird. After Billy disappeared, Margaret changed. She became convinced that something in the building had taken her son. Something, not someone. That's what Mrs. Patel emphasized. Margaret started talking about it living in the walls, watching her. She covered all her windows with aluminum foil. Mrs. Patel said she'd put towels under her door at night and would only leave the apartment during daylight hours. I slid another article across the table. She died in 1994. Emma nodded. Mrs. Patel said it was a heart attack. The building manager found her when neighbors complained about a smell. She was alone in the apartment, all the windows still covered with foil, food rotting in the fridge. Jesus! It gets worse. Mrs. Patel said that after Margaret died, the apartment was renovated and rented out, but no one stayed long. There were complaints about strange noises, electrical problems, cold spots, the same things we've been experiencing. Emma pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Mrs. Patel gave me this. She said she found it slipped under her door about 5 years ago. I unfolded the paper, reading hurried handwriting. If you live in this building, be aware. There are things you must never do. 1. Never go into the basement alone. 2. Never knock 3 times on any door after midnight. 3. If you hear a child crying, ignore it. 4. Don't look behind the boiler. These aren't our rules, I said. No, but they're similar. Mrs. Patel thinks different tenants have encountered different aspects of whatever's in the building. They've each created their own set of rules based on what they experienced. I pulled out my phone and showed Emma the rental listings I'd found. Look at the pattern. New tenants every few months in our apartment. And the most recent, Michael Reynolds. Emma read. The one who moved out right before us. I bet he's the one who left our rules. We sat quietly for a moment, processing everything we'd learned. Outside the diner window, afternoon shadows stretched across the sidewalk. Do you think it's connected to Billy? Emma finally asked. Is he still in the building somehow? I don't know. I gathered the articles, folding them carefully. But I think Michael Reynolds might know more. I'm going to try to contact him. How? You don't have his information. Not yet, but the building management should have forwarding details for mail. I'll call tomorrow. We paid for Emma's coffee and walked back to our building in silence, both lost in thoughts about what we'd discovered. Our apartment felt different now that we knew its history. I looked at the walls differently, imagining Margaret Henderson covering the windows with foil, trapped in her fear after losing her son. "Should we stay here tonight?" Emma asked as she put her keys on the counter. "We could get a hotel." I shook my head. "We need to understand what we're dealing with first. If we run now, we might never come back. Besides, as long as we follow the rules, we should be okay." Emma didn't look convinced, but she nodded. We spent the evening searching online, trying to find any other information about our building and its history. I combed through social media and people finder websites for Michael Reynolds and finally found what seemed to be his current address and phone number in Williamsburg. By the time we went to bed, we were exhausted but had a plan. Tomorrow, I would call Michael Reynolds and see what he knew about our apartment. We followed all the rules: curtains closed at sunset, bedroom door open, salt lines redone at entry points as a safety measure Emma had read about online. The night was quiet until about 2:30 a.m., when I woke to a soft sound. Crying. A child crying. It came from inside our bedroom closet. Quiet, muffled sobs that rose and fell with heartbreaking sadness. "Emma," I whispered, shaking her shoulder. "Do you hear that?" She came awake instantly, her eyes wide in the dim light from the hallway. "Is that?" "It's coming from the closet." We both sat up, listening to the soft weeping. It sounded so real, so human, a child in genuine distress. "We should check," Emma said, though her voice trembled. I nodded, though I really didn't want to. We got out of bed slowly, the wooden floor cold under our feet. As we approached the closet, the temperature plummeted. I could see my breath in front of my face, and Emma wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. The closet door was closed. I reached for the handle, paused for a second, then pulled it open quickly. Empty hangers with our clothes, shoes lined up below, boxes on the shelf above. Nothing that could have made the crying sound. But the cold, it was intense inside the closet. So cold it hurt to breathe. At least 20 degrees colder than the rest of the room. "There's nothing here," Emma whispered. I reached inside, feeling among the hanging clothes. My fingers went numb from the cold, but I touched nothing unusual. The crying had stopped the moment I opened the door. We backed away from the closet, neither of us willing to close it again. We returned to bed, pulling the covers tight around us, facing the open closet door until morning. I called Michael Reynolds' number early the next morning, planning what I'd say. After learning about Billy Henderson's disappearance and the apartment's disturbing rental history, I knew Michael might be our only chance to understand what was happening. The phone rang 4 times before a cautious voice answered. "Hello? Michael Reynolds." "Yes. This is Ryan Mitchell. I moved into your old apartment on Flatbush Avenue." Silence stretched for so long I thought he'd hung up. "I don't live there anymore," he finally said, his voice tight. "I know. I'm calling because we've been having some issues with the apartment. I also need to forward some mail that came for you." Another long pause. "What kind of issues?" I considered how much to reveal. "The kind related to the list of rules you left." I heard him catch his breath on the other end. I knew I was right. "I didn't leave any list," he said, but his denial lacked conviction. "Look, we found the rules, and we've seen what happens when they're broken. I need to understand what's going on in our apartment." "You need to move out," Michael said, his voice suddenly urgent. "Just leave. Today." "We can't do that. We signed a lease. Put down a deposit we can't afford to lose. Your lives are worth more than a security deposit. That's why I'm calling you. Help us understand what we're dealing with so we can protect ourselves." The line went quiet again. I could hear Michael's breathing, quick and shallow. "Please," I added. "We've experienced the child at the door, the TV turning on, something in the refrigerator. We need to know what it is. After what felt like an eternity, Michael sighed. Fine. But not over the phone. Meet me at the Daily Press Cafe in Williamsburg at noon. Come alone. I'll be there. I hung up and found Emma in the kitchen making coffee. He agreed to meet. Just me, though. She frowned. I don't like the idea of you going alone. He seemed scared. Emma. I don't think he's a threat. It's not him I'm worried about. She handed me a mug. What if this is a trap? What if whatever's in the apartment can somehow, I don't know, follow you? I hadn't considered that. You think it can leave the building? I have no idea what it can do. That's the problem. She had a point, but we needed answers. I'll be careful. I'll stay in public places, and I'll text you updates. Emma looked like she wanted to argue but nodded instead. Okay. But if anything feels wrong, you leave immediately. Deal. The Daily Press was a small cafe between a vintage clothing store and a record shop. I arrived 15 minutes early and grabbed a table in the corner with a clear view of the door. Michael arrived exactly at noon. I recognized him immediately from his hunched posture and weary eyes. He was probably my age but looked much older, gaunt face, dark circles under pale blue eyes, clothes hanging loose on his thin frame. He scanned the cafe before spotting me and walking over. Ryan, he asked, remaining standing. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. Thanks for meeting me. He sat down but kept his jacket on. His eyes darted around the cafe, never settling on anything for long. You said there was mail, he asked. That was just an excuse to contact you, I admitted. We need to talk about the apartment. Michael's hands clenched on the table. There's nothing to talk about. Just move out. We can't. And we need to understand what we're dealing with. A server approached, and Michael fell silent until she left with our orders, coffee for me, tea for him. The list of rules, I prompted when we were alone again. You wrote them, didn't you? He stared down at the table. Yes. How did you learn them? The hard way. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a jagged scar running from wrist to elbow. That's from breaking rule number 4. I looked at the TV screen when it turned on at 3 a.m. I remembered what I'd seen in the static, the distorted child's face with needle teeth. I saw something in the TV, too. Just for a second. Michael nodded grimly. You're lucky it was just a second. It tried to pull me through the screen. I barely got away. Smashed the TV with a baseball bat. He rolled his sleeve back down. Each rule I discovered through trial and error. Our drinks arrived. Michael held his mug but didn't drink. What is it? I asked. A ghost? He shook his head. Not a ghost. Ghosts are just leftover traces, like footprints. This thing is alive. It feeds on fear, grows stronger with it. The rules are like fences that keep its power in check. When you break them, you let it manifest more strongly. Is it connected to Billy Henderson? The boy who disappeared in 1978. Michael's eyes widened. You've been doing research. Yes. We know he vanished from the building. Was never found. I found newspaper articles about him, too. I think the entity was already there when Billy disappeared. It might have taken him. He hesitated. Or it might be using his form to lure others. The child at the door, I said, remembering the voice pleading to be let in. Exactly. It's not really a child. It just appears that way because children are. Michael's hands trembled slightly. They're vulnerable. Easy targets. That's why rule number 5 exists. Never let children inside the apartment. The entity would be drawn to them instantly. I thought of the crying we'd heard from our closet the night before. Can it appear in different forms? We heard a child crying inside our bedroom closet. It can mimic sounds, create illusions. The more fear it absorbs, the more powerful those illusions become. He leaned forward. Listen carefully. It can't physically harm you unless you break the rules or actively engage with it. The rules create a sort of barrier that contains it. How do we get rid of it? Michael took a sip of his tea, his first since it arrived. There might be a way, but it's dangerous. He looked around the cafe again, then lowered his voice. It has weaknesses. Direct sunlight hurts it. That's why the first rule is about closing curtains at sunset. If you leave them open, it's weaker. But that didn't stop it from appearing at our door. No, but it limits how much it can manifest. There are other protective measures, too. He reached into his pocket and slid a folded paper across the table. Salt lines at doorways and windows. Specific symbols drawn in chalk above entrances. They won't banish it, but they'll create safe zones it can't easily penetrate. I took the paper, studying the strange symbols drawn there. How do you know all this? Research. Trial and error. Talking to previous tenants. He paused. A woman named Margaret Henderson. Billy's mother, I interrupted. Michael nodded. She left notes hidden throughout the apartment. I found them during my time there. She'd been studying the entity for years after her son disappeared. Why didn't she leave? After losing her son. I think she was waiting for him to return. Michael's voice softened. Or she was too afraid to leave, thinking it would follow her. Will it follow us if we move out? Michael hesitated. I don't know. It seems tied to the building, but I couldn't say for certain it wouldn't attach itself to someone who's been exposed to it. That explained why he'd agreed to meet me. His own uncertainty about whether he was truly free. You said there might be a way to get rid of it. Michael looked at his watch. I need to go. I've said too much already. He stood up. Use the protections I gave you. Follow the rules. I'll contact you in a few days with more information. Wait, I started. But he was already walking away. At the door, he turned back. One more thing. It's strongest at midnight. Stay alert during that hour. Then he left. I told Emma everything when I got home. We spread Michael's paper on the kitchen table, examining the symbols and instructions. Salt lines at all entry points, Emma read. Symbols drawn in chalk above doorways. No iron or silver in the apartment, it supposedly makes the entity angry. We already removed the metal sculptures yesterday, I said. And we have chalk in the art supplies box from when you were sketching. We spent the afternoon preparing, drawing the strange symbols above every doorway and window. We poured thick lines of salt at each doorway and across every windowsill. By sunset, we had fortified our apartment against the supernatural as best we could. Though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it would work. Do you think Michael is reliable? Emma asked as we finished the last salt line. What if he's just paranoid? He knew about the rules. He had that scar. And everything he said matches what we've experienced. She sighed, dusting salt from her hands. I just wish we had more to go on than the word of one traumatized former tenant. We have the newspaper articles, too, I reminded her. And Mrs. Patel's stories. It all fits together. Night fell, and we followed all the usual rules, curtains closed, bedroom door open. We sat together on the couch watching a movie but not really paying attention. Both of us were waiting for midnight. At 11:57 p.m., the lights began to flicker. Subtle at first, just brief dimming that could have been a normal power fluctuation. "It's starting," Emma whispered. By 11:59, the flickering had intensified. The lamp in the corner went out completely, then came back on, but dimmer than before. The TV screen grew fuzzy, though the movie kept playing. Midnight struck, and all the lights in the apartment pulsed together. The temperature dropped so fast I could see our breath in the air. Then we heard whispering, soft, childlike voices that seemed to emanate from the walls. "Do you hear that?" Emma asked, her voice tight with fear. I nodded, trying to make out the words. They were too faint, too jumbled to understand, but they definitely sounded like children. The whispering grew louder, surrounding us. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on us. My ears popped painfully. Emma grabbed my arm. "Ryan, I can't do this. We need to leave." "We can't run now," I said, though my own heart was racing. "Look, the salt lines are holding." It was true. Though the air felt frigid and the lights kept flickering, the whispering stayed in the walls. Nothing had crossed the protective boundaries we'd set up. "Michael said it feeds on fear," I reminded her. "We need to stay calm." The minute hand on the wall clock moved painfully slow. The whispering continued for exactly 15 minutes before fading away. The light stopped flickering, and the temperature gradually returned to normal. "Is it over?" Emma asked, still gripping my arm. "For now." We stayed on the couch, neither willing to move until we were certain the entity had retreated. By 1 a.m., the apartment felt normal again, or as normal as it could feel, knowing what lurked within its walls. "We can't live like this," Emma said as we finally headed to bed, jumping at every sound, dreading sunset. "I know." I pulled her close as we lay in bed, the bedroom door propped firmly open. "But I think Michael knows how to fight it. We just need to wait for him to contact us again. And if he doesn't," I thought about what Michael had told me about the entity's weaknesses, "then we take matters into our own hands. It has vulnerabilities. Sunlight weakens it. The salt lines contain it. There must be a way to drive it out permanently." "How?" I turned to face her in the darkness. "I have an idea. Michael said breaking the rules gives it permission to manifest more strongly. What if we deliberately break a rule, but on our terms? Draw it out when we're ready." That sounds incredibly dangerous. It is, but it might be our only chance to confront this thing directly. Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Which rule?" "Rule number 3. Don't open the refrigerator between 1 and 2 a.m. We've seen it manifest there before. We could set a trap." "When?" "Tomorrow night. We'll need supplies first, UV lights to simulate sunlight. More salt. And we should research binding rituals, folk magic, exorcisms, anything that might help contain or banish it." Emma's hand found mine in the darkness. "This is crazy. You know that. Crazier than a child's voice at our door at 3 a.m.? Or something living in our refrigerator." She sighed. "Point taken. So, tomorrow night, we deliberately break Rule 3. Yes. We bring this thing out into the open and face it head-on. We lay awake for hours planning our confrontation with the entity. Neither of us was certain it would work, but doing nothing was no longer an option. If we couldn't move out, we had to find a way to live with, or hopefully without, the thing that haunted our apartment. The digital clock on the microwave flipped to 1:29 a.m. Emma and I exchanged a final glance across the darkened apartment. We had spent all day preparing for this moment, this deliberate violation of Rule 3. "Ready?" I whispered. Emma nodded from where she crouched behind the kitchen island, her hand hovering over the UV light switch we'd rigged up. I pressed myself against the wall next to the refrigerator, trying to remain quiet. The microwave display changed to 1:30 a.m. I reached out and pulled the refrigerator door wide open, then quickly retreated to my hiding spot. For several seconds, nothing happened. The refrigerator light shone across the kitchen floor. Normal food items sat on normal shelves. I almost wondered if we'd gotten the timing wrong. Then the light inside the refrigerator blinked once, twice, and went out completely. The darkness that followed wasn't just normal darkness. It was thicker, like it was consuming the light from the microwave and the street lamps filtering through our curtains. The temperature plummeted so fast I could see my breath. From the refrigerator, something began to emerge. Not a person or an animal, but a shadow that moved with purpose. Darker than everything around it, it poured out like smoke, spreading across the kitchen floor before coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape. That was our cue. Now! I shouted. Emma yanked the cord on the UV lights we'd positioned around the kitchen while I lunged for the window and ripped the curtains open. Moonlight streamed in, combining with the harsh purple-blue glow of the UV lamps. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The entity made a sound I'll never forget, like a dozen children screaming in unison, their voices layered and distorted. The shadow twisted violently, recoiling, trying to retreat from the light but finding nowhere to go. "Ryan!" Emma yelled over the terrible screaming. I pulled the paper Michael had given me from my pocket and began to recite the binding words he'd taught me earlier that day. They weren't in any language I recognized, a mixture of Latin-sounding phrases and guttural syllables that felt wrong in my mouth. Tenebris vinculum lucis imperat sanctuis. As I spoke, Emma moved quickly around the kitchen, completing the circle of salt we'd partially laid out earlier. The entity seemed to sense what was happening and lashed out, sending a tendril of darkness toward her ankle. "Emma!" I shouted in warning. She jumped back just in time, the shadow missing her by inches. But she kept going and finished the salt circle, connecting it all the way around the writhing dark shape. The effect was immediate. The shadow pulled together, condensing until it looked vaguely like a small child, but wrong. Its arms and legs were too long, its head slightly too large, and it moved with jerky, unnatural motions. "Keep reading," Emma urged, backing away from the salt circle. I continued the incantation, my voice growing stronger as I saw it working. The entity was trapped now, confined to a corner of our kitchen by the combination of light, salt, and the binding words. Sigillum clausuri porta obstructa. Emma grabbed the wooden box Michael had given us from the counter. It was small, about the size of a cigar box, carved with symbols that matched the ones we'd drawn above our doorways. She placed it on the floor just outside the salt circle, opening the lid toward the entity. I spoke the final words of the binding ritual, in capsa, in sepulchro, in aeternum. The shadow child turned its face toward me. A face with only suggestions of features, like a drawing that had been smudged before it dried. It opened what might have been a mouth, and a voice that was both young and ancient spoke. "I'll wait. I always wait." Then, like smoke being vacuumed into a narrow opening, the darkness began to pull toward the box. It stretched and thinned, fighting against the pull but unable to resist. The screaming started again, rising in pitch until I had to cover my ears. Emma stayed put, holding the box steady as the thing was drawn inside. The process took minutes that felt like hours, the darkness slowly diminishing until it slipped completely into the wooden container. The moment the last bit disappeared inside, Emma slammed the lid shut. The screaming cut off instantly, leaving us in a kitchen that seemed too quiet and too bright. We looked at each other, both breathing hard, neither quite believing what had just happened. "Did it work?" Emma asked, her voice shaky. "I think so." I approached the box cautiously. It looked ordinary now, just a wooden container sitting on our kitchen floor. But when I got close, I could feel cold emanating from it, like opening a freezer door. We need to seal it before dawn. We didn't touch the box for the rest of the night, staying on opposite sides of the kitchen, watching it. Neither of us tried to sleep. We watched the sky slowly brighten outside our window. When the sun came up, we began the sealing process Michael had described. Emma melted black wax in a small pot while I drew the final symbols on the box's lid with chalk. Once the wax was ready, I traced each symbol with it, sealing whatever was inside. "That should hold it," I said, setting down the brush. "At least long enough for us to get it to the cemetery." Emma looked at the box wearily. "I still can't believe we're doing this." Michael was very specific about where it needs to be buried. Something about the cemetery ground being consecrated. We packed the box carefully in a backpack, surrounded by salt-filled bags for extra protection. By 7 a.m., we were in our car heading toward Greenwood Cemetery in South Brooklyn. The cemetery was already open when we arrived. Its Gothic entrance arch stood tall against the morning sky. Michael had drawn us a detailed map showing exactly where to go, a remote corner near an old mausoleum, far from the main paths. "This feels wrong," Emma said as we hiked through the quiet grounds, fallen leaves crunching under our feet. "Like we're desecrating something." According to Michael, we're doing the opposite. He said this place has old protections built into it. The entity will be contained here better than anywhere else. We found the spot, a small clearing between 3 very old oak trees, marked by a weathered stone with no name. I dug while Emma kept watch, making sure no groundskeepers or early morning visitors spotted us. The hole didn't need to be deep, just enough to hide the box completely. When it was ready, I placed our burden inside and covered it quickly with dirt, patting the earth flat when I was done. "Should we say something?" Emma asked when I stood up. I shook my head. "Let's just go." We walked back through the cemetery in silence, both exhausted from the night's events. Had we really trapped a supernatural entity in a box and buried it in a cemetery? It seemed impossible now in the morning light, but the memory of that shadow child's face was too real to deny. Our apartment felt different when we got back. The air seemed lighter somehow, the rooms brighter. We checked each room for any signs the entity was still around. The kitchen was a mess from our confrontation, salt all over the floor, UV light still in the corners, the refrigerator door open. But the oppressive feeling that had filled our home since we moved in was gone. "Do you think it worked?" Emma asked, closing the refrigerator door. "Only one way to find out." I glanced at the clock. It was just after noon. "We'll have to wait until tonight to be sure." We cleaned up the kitchen, swept away the salt, and put our makeshift UV setup into storage. Then, too tired to do anything else, we collapsed into bed and slept deeply for the first time since moving in. I woke to evening light filtering through our bedroom window. Emma was still asleep beside me, her face peaceful. I checked my phone, 6:18 p.m. We'd slept for over 6 hours. Moving quietly, I got up and walked through the apartment. The normal sounds of the building surrounded me, a neighbor's footsteps, distant music, the hum of the refrigerator. Everything felt ordinary in a way it hadn't since we'd moved in. I stood in the kitchen, remembering the shadow that had emerged from our refrigerator just hours ago. Had we really done it? Had we actually trapped and removed the entity that had terrorized us? Emma appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep. "How does it feel?" "Normal," I said. "Just normal." We spent the evening in cautious optimism, following our usual routine but watching for any signs of the supernatural. We ordered takeout, watched a movie, and as sunset approached, we debated whether to close the curtains. "The rules," Emma said, looking at the list still taped to our refrigerator. "Do you think we still need to follow them?" I considered this. Better safe than sorry. At least for tonight. So we closed the curtains at sunset, kept the bedroom door open, and avoided the refrigerator during the forbidden hour. But the night passed without incident. No knocking at the door, no TV turning on by itself, no crying from the closet. By morning, we were cautiously celebrating our victory. Should we move anyway? Emma asked over coffee. Find a new place without all this history. I looked around our apartment, at the high ceilings we'd loved on moving day, the hardwood floors with their worn spots, the windows that let in bright morning light. I don't know. It feels like our place now. Like we've claimed it. We did pay a lot for that security deposit, Emma said with a small smile. And the rent is below market. And we did just exorcise a supernatural entity, which has to count for something on the tenant resume. I laughed, feeling happier than I had in weeks. So, we stay. Emma nodded. We stay. But we keep the rules posted, just in case. And we maintain the protective measures Michael taught us, I added. The salt lines, the symbols. A small price to pay for peace of mind. We knew, of course, that the entity wasn't destroyed, just contained. The wooden box buried in Greenwood Cemetery held something very old and patient. Something that had told us, I'll wait. Like it didn't care about time the way we do. But for now, our home was ours again. We could live normally, sleep soundly, and open the refrigerator at any hour without fear. The rules remained posted on our refrigerator door, a reminder and a precaution. As long as we followed them and maintained our protections, we could make this place our home. That afternoon, we opened all the curtains and let the sunlight fill every corner of the apartment. The shadows retreated to normal, and for the first time since moving in, I felt like we truly belonged here.